Hello and welcome to the Nittany Gritty, brought to you by the good folks at Beyond the Big Ten. I am Jon Sauber, Penn State men's basketball writer at the Center Daily Times. He is Penn State legend Tim Frazier. Tim, how you doing?
Doing well, man. How was your Thanksgiving?
It was good. Did not spend it at home this year. Penn State football played in Detroit on Black Friday, so I went out a day early. Went out on Wednesday, actually. Went and saw Lions-Packers on Thanksgiving Day. Found out that they had something called the Power Hour at Lions games where it's $4 for beer and cocktails for like an hour and a half before kick. So had a good time. Ate at Buffalo Wild Wings on Thanksgiving Day, which is probably like the low point of my life, but that's fine. We were rolling it. How was yours?
Man, it was good. I got the time to spend with the family. You know, it's during basketball, you miss these holidays. So to be here at home with the family, man, it means a lot. For me to just be able to be around and just get the home cooked meals. I think last year Thanksgiving I'm eating in Greece, man, getting a Greek salad and a gyro, and some Slovakia, but which is delicious, by the way. But other than that, man, it was good, man, to be home.
Yeah, that's the tough part for me, right? Like not being around my family for Thanksgiving, not having my parents' meal and all that stuff. But it's weird. You kind of get used to it. Even like in my line of work, right? Like I'll actually get to be home for Christmas this year because Penn State's playing in the Peach Bowl, which I don't leave till the 26th. So that'll be nice. But yeah, no, I definitely. It's funny. Like you try to block that stuff out when you're just not there, so you don't have to think about the fact that you're not with your family and everything. But then you get home and you realize like all the stuff you missed and stuff. It's just not the same. But I was working Thanksgiving weekend. Penn State men's basketball was trying to work on Thanksgiving weekend. It was not a fruitful performance, I'll say, right down in Kissimmee, Florida at the ESPN Events Invitational. The program lost and we can talk about these as kind of a whole and like the whole, the feeling coming out of that weekend before we get into what is the worst loss in program history. But, have a really competitive game against Texas A&M, really good team, and then kind of came out flat against Butler and then VCU. And, man, it felt like a missed opportunity after how well they played against A&M.
I agree. When you watch that game against A&M, you see those guys. They had fire, they had intensity. It was some trash talk, and it was like, hey man, like we're here. It was what those guys had told me at Big Ten Media Day is about, hey man, we're here to make some noise, and we're gonna do that. And you saw that in that A&M game, back and forth action. Big shot here from Kanye, big shot from Ace, like the big fella as well. Everybody was on top of their game, and they knew it was like, hey man, we're on the national stage with the first game at a tournament. Like it's time to put the world on notice. And it's disappointing. Like you lose a tough loss, and losses come with the game. You win and lose some, but the next game against Butler, you sit there, you're like, okay, Butler's a good team, well coached, as well, and you're going out there and you're competing on a back to back. You know what I mean? The next day, and they just started slow, and you just wonder if, man, hey, will they use all their energy, or they're just not that ready to be able to bounce back from losses or big games. And then you kind of look at that, and then from there it's just a trickle effect. And then I know it weighs on players as well. Sitting there, it's like, hey, you know what, we're 0-2. We can't be the last place team in a tournament. We got to win this game. And it was just literally Cinderella set in stone that, hey, we're going to play against VCU, coach's old team, Ace's old team, a couple of other players' old team that transferred over. And, it was just so much tension. You could just tell them, like you saw the players, they're squeezing the rock hard. Like they're not, focusing on that. It was more of instead of a team game, it became a one-on-one game to prove for some of those guys to prove like, hey man, like we made the right decision of leaving. And you could see it too, like with the coaches as well, like just the plays, everything growing up. It was just, and to top it all off, man, VCU had their fans there. VCU always travels well, and they had their fans there. It felt like a home game for those guys. And it's really unfortunate just to see, like, when you think about this team and how good they can be. And just right now, they're playing under their potential right now, which is, very, unfortunate.
Yeah, and you mentioned VCU having their fans too. Like it's one of those things when you're at a tournament like that, fans, even so VCU has their fans there, and then you have the fans that are just there to watch the games. Yep. They usually gravitate to the team that's like the underdog or the Cinderella story, right? So like VCU's a group of 6 school, Penn State's Power 6 school, right? They're going to be rooting against Penn State. So like things get going for VCU, and it snowballs. You mentioned the not coming out right against Butler on the back-to-back. Like that's something we asked Mike Rhodes about, right? On, I think it was that Monday, asked him about, did he feel like the team kind of let one loss turn into two, turn into three? And I had asked the question, and before I could even finish the question, like he knew where I was going, he said yes, right? Like, and he went into his answer about like, they just weren't, they kind of came out flat after that first loss. And that's the stuff that you kind of can't let happen. Right. Like you can't let one disappointing moral victory for all intents and purposes, right, against A&M, where it felt like they were at least like, hey, we can do this. Like we're going to be able to do that. They can't go out then and do that against Butler, do that against VCU, and just kind of, I don't know. They got this ball rolling right now in a place that's really bad. Right. You mentioned they're just not playing to that level right now. Frankly, I think it's in a spot where it's tough to see what the high end level is. And I understand like frustration by, fans are frustrated with it. If former players, former coach, whatever, like if people are really frustrated by this, because you look at those three games and it's like, man, that first loss, it's a fine loss. The second one, it's like, all right. The third one, it's like, okay, this is tough. And then to come back home, play Bucknell, who was at the time of the game, and I tweeted this out, they were number 330 in the country in KenPom out of 360 some teams. I think it's 362 or 365. Penn State had never lost to a team above the rank 300 in the country in KenPom, basically, and that started in 1999. So the last 24 years. And there have been some Penn State teams that have not been good, right, in that time frame. To go out and lose that game at home is like a whoa, right? Like it's the kind of moment that you have where it's like you got to take a step back. And for me, like you're kind of evaluating how it's going. You're kind of telling the story of this team, what it's looked like so far, what it's going to look like moving forward. It's that game was the one where I had to take a step back and kind of recalibrate everything, because it's one thing to let one loss turn into two, turn into three against schools like, maybe they're not as great this year, but like Butler and VCU, which have been good programs. It's another to do it against a Bucknell team that just, it was 2-7 coming into the game, had no business being on the court, and they win the game. Like that's to me, and I know like obviously you've been playing basketball for a long, long time. Have you ever had that kind of loss where Penn State was favored by 22 points in this game, right? Like this was not supposed to be close. Favored by 22. Have you ever had a loss like that where it kind of makes you kind of reevaluate everything at that point?
I'm not sure that I can't really come off the top of my head just to say that.
I was going to say for someone who's played that long, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but
it says a lot about how bad this was.
And to say that too, with that, if I did have it, these are the games you just forget about. You know what I mean? Yeah. So maybe there might be something that somebody
listen, it didn't happen when you were at Penn State.
Well, shoot, I don't know, but
listen, I checked the data on that one for you.
It might not be above 300, but it was some teams that when I sit back and I watch and I'm like, man, how did we lose this game? I think a game that come to mind is we lost to someone and when we played in the other arena, not at the BJC at Rec Hall, and we had our whiteout jerseys and we ended up losing a game, and a game we should have won. Like I said, there was games that you look back and you're like, man, even though it might not have been as bad of a loss when you look at the numbers in KenPom and things, but there's definitely been games. But you know what I've done? I erased them, and I think that's what this team has to do in order to stop this snowball from rolling downhill. There has to be something that maybe I've learned this in life, and that things happen for you to really get back on the right track. And sometimes you have to get hit you have to be knocked down. You have to hit rock bottom. And I'm not saying that this is rock bottom for that team, but it's definitely something that, stings enough to be close to that, and right now, coach and the players have to come together and understand that right now people are giving up on you. Like the hype from the team, the hype from, everything coming before the year, that's all gone. And now it's time to prove ourselves and come together as a team and understand that, hey, who we got is in his locker room. Even some of the family members are probably walking away. So who you have in his locker room, who you're going to war with, who you're going to practice with, who your blood, sweat, and tears with, that's who you're going to roll with. And you got to come together. And right now, that's the only way to get out of this funk. And that's happened for me and throughout my career. It might not be as bad as the loss to Bucknell, but in the NBA, in college, and overseas, and even in elementary school and playing, like there's going to be ups and downs and wins and losses. And another way to get out of there, you stick with the people that you have to be able to get out of that funk and make a run. And I keep saying the word unfortunate because it's very unfortunate, because when we talked about this a couple weeks ago, we talked about how maybe this team could be this, can be that. They're going to catch some teams. They're going to do that. And not saying that's not going to happen, but right now, when you look at it just off this 4-game losing skid, they're not doing the things that we knew that's what they were going to do, which is, hey, we're going to pick a full court. We're going to force turnovers. We're going to do that. And they haven't even been doing that at a high level. So I think that's where you go back to. If I'm coach, if I'm the players, hey man, we got to go back to being who we are. And that's picking up full court, that's forcing turnovers, that's wreaking havoc, and let the other stuff fall. Because obviously we can go back and we can look at the numbers. Hey man, they're not shooting the three well. They're not doing this. They're not doing that, turning the ball over too much. Hey, you know what? Let's just focus on what our staple is, what we decided we're going to be. This is the type of team we're going to be. And just focus on that and let the other stuff come. Because what I do know is, like, when you're rolling and you're doing the things that you are doing great, the stuff that you don't do great, sometimes the basketball guys get to work and now you start making threes.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned the kind of this is all they got right now is who's in that locker room. And listen, I've seen it like on Twitter and stuff. Like you see people saying like, well, I'm glad they lost early. I can give up on the team this, you know what I mean? In December rather than later in the year and all that stuff. And like that really is it. I think the problem is one of the big problems right now, though, is we don't know if they have the kind of guys that can bring you back from this, right, in that locker room. And I think that's tough to tell from the outside. It always is. But there were some comments from Mike Rhodes that I thought were really interesting. He got asked, and I'm curious for your opinion on this. He got asked by Nate Bauer, Blue White Illustrated, basically, do they have that energy guy that brings it no matter what? The kind of guy that's going to, no matter how bad it's going, he's going to bring the energy, he's going to bring the juice, he's going to hype other guys up, he's going to get them into the game. And Rhodes like laughed and said, when they're playing well, you know what I mean? So it's that kind of thing, like where they've got guys that'll bring juice, but they're only bringing it when their shots are falling or when they're creating for themselves, or, you know, they're getting assists by creating for other guys. Like, to me, that's really concerning. Like, you have to have guys that are going to bring that energy no matter what. And listen, you've been on, like I said, a lot of teams, right? Every season at Penn State was a new team for you. Every team in the NBA, like even if you're on the same team, it's a new team because it's a new roster every single year. What is it like when you don't have maybe that consistent energy, right? Like, is there a feeling of like, are you kind of looking around waiting for like, can someone fix this? You know what I mean? Like, because it's when you don't have that one guy, like it's tough.
Well, I think part of it is, you know, that's a feel-good team. People say that all the time. Are you a feel-good team? And like we would go into games sometimes. We'd be like, hey, this is a feel-good team. If we stop them from feeling good, then they'll fold. And right now, that's kind of how it looks. It's like, hey, man, if the shots aren't going, if Ace isn't doing, if he isn't getting what he wants, if Kanye isn't getting what he wants, if Puff isn't making his shots, like if those guys aren't doing the things that they need to do, then they're going to fold and then they're going to press. And as far as when I say press, not full court press, I'm saying they're starting to press and drive in the guys more than like force turnovers. And that's the thing that's happening. And then when you say like you need somebody that brings the energy, I don't know if it's necessarily the energy guy, but it's the guy who's the leader right now. And like, I think Coach, you know, I'm sure you were going to talk about John, but I think Coach kind of established that from the jump that it was going to be Ace because, hey man, you A10 player of the year, you're coming over, you're the guy. Hey, I'm putting the ball in your hands. You're the leader, and he's not leading. If you, I think from the coach from what I've read as well is that he's not leading. And coach said that himself. He's like, hey man, I need Ace to be Ace and be the ace for this team, and he's not doing that. And I think that's more so what's needed more than hey the rah-rah or the bringing the energy and all that type of stuff, man. It's that because when the things aren't going well, who's going to pull this team together and be like, you know what, it's good, I got us, or we got each other. You know what I mean? Yeah. Who's going to, like, everybody wants to score the points, go out there and score 30, but hey, man, who's going to bring the team together when the things we're going well? And it's like, hey, man, we just need to stop. If we can get one stop, the other stuff will start happening. Who's going to bring the five together, and who's gonna rally us that way? You know, the energy goes. You know, energy is contagious, and when you have a guy like something that you can put in the game, and they're just going to take off and just bring so much energy that it's just going to go from top to bottom. Like I prime example is the dude Andrew Nimyard. Hopefully I pronounced his name last night. I watched the game last night.
Yeah, that was a great game.
And the playing game, you know, and he literally changes that game because he comes with all his energy and just to top it off, it was so much better because he's playing his former team, so he's so juiced up. He's playing with energy, and it trickled all the way down throughout their whole team to the point where Tyrese started being Tyrese, Buddy Hield started being those guys, and that's what is needed right now. And it has to come from, you know, I mean, I hate to say it has to come from Ace or it has to come from Kanye Claire because most of the time you would think the best most of the time when it's the great teams or when the good teams happen, it's coming from the guys that are taking the shots. And those two guys are taking the shots. So even when those guys aren't making the shots, they need to be able to rally their team together and have them, hey, you know what? Hey, I'm missing, but hey, don't worry, I got you guys. Or, hey, man, let's get a stop right here. Hey, when I catch you on the wing, I attack him on a drive, hit him with a floater. You know what I mean? And I don't see too much of that. I do see it when I was saying a feel-good team, because you saw it in the A&M game. Back and forth. They playing hard, dapping each other up, diving on the floor, competing. And then, but from there, it was just like these last 3 games, you kind of just see it in spurts when it wasn't necessarily it needed to be done throughout the whole entire game.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned what Mike Rhodes said about Ace, right? Because that was one of the things that I was like kind of hung up on, right? Because I had asked that question. This was yesterday, Monday, December 4th, like at the press conference that we had, like Ace didn't start twice so far this year in 8 games. Right. He started every game at VCU. Every game he played in at VCU, he started. So he didn't start a quarter of his games already at Penn State. So I asked Rhodes, like, what is, like, do you need, are you getting the same Ace Baldwin at Penn State that you got at VCU on and off the court? And Mike was pretty unequivocal, right? He straightforward with it too. He was like, I need a better version of Ace on and off the court. And he said he loved him. You know, that bond is clearly strong between those two. They've been through a lot together, but he was very clear that he needs a better version of Ace on and off the court, and that Ace knows that, and that Ace is going to get better and everything. But until that happens, you're right? Like this has got to be the guy. Kanye Clary is good. We're seeing how much he's developing. He's still just a sophomore though, right? And this is his first year having a big role on the team. He's not led a team before. He was a piece of last year's team. I mentioned this to him when we talked to him yesterday too. Like he was a piece of last year's team. Now he's one of the guys, right? Like when
I will say this, not to cut you off, John, but I didn't see this from Kanye Clary last year. I didn't see the stuff that I'm seeing now. So I don't know. I don't know if it's confidence, but he did seem very confident at the Big Ten Media Day. I don't know if it's that, if he really just worked on his game, or if it's just, hey, you know what, coach believing in me and giving me the ropes. But I didn't see this at all last year. So that is a bright side to see that hey, you do have another guy that can get in the paint, try to score, and do the things that are needed for the team to win. But you know what I mean, all that's fine and dandy if you can't win. So at the end of the day, they got to find some way to win.
Yeah, and you know, Kanye too, like the shots going in a little more so far this year too, which is always going to be helpful, especially for a guy that can put as much pressure on the rim as he can, right? Like that's one of those things with that was one of the questions when he was a recruit. Like he's obviously really fast. He's good at using his body to create contact and finish at the rim, but can he shoot enough to not just let guys sag off and then eventually, you know what I mean? He can't get to the rim because it's easier when a guy's playing 6 feet off you to guard a guy like that. But no, like he's got to be one of those guys offensively. I do think it's probably asking too much to expect him to be a leader at this point, though, especially with like Nace with Ace, especially like he didn't just come in as like a veteran guy. You mentioned the A10 player of the year, defensive player of the year in the A10 and everything, a guy that Rhodes knows. Like he's supposed to set the culture. He knows the culture that Mike Rhodes wants. He knows the culture that they had at VCU. He knows what it's supposed to look like. And I would assume that it's disappointing for Rhodes and everyone involved that through 8 games, they're not getting that guy that's setting the culture. They're not getting the guy that's being the leader. And like Rhodes said, Ace knows that. Ace is going to get better at it. He kind of has to, right? Because if he doesn't, you know, you mentioned rock bottom. Listen, they're not going to face a worse opponent this year than Bucknell, but this season can feel worse. You know, like if it doesn't get better, it can feel worse if they're 14th in the Big Ten or whatever. If they struggle to get to 10 wins or what have you, like this can get worse. So they really do. I think there's got to be urgency here too, because they've got 2 games coming up against Maryland, against Ohio State. They go on the road Wednesday night, play Maryland. Maryland's also struggling, right? Like this is 2 teams. You don't even get if you're Penn State, their backs against the wall, like we have it, like we're going to come out swinging because this is all we've got left. Maryland's going to be doing that too, right? Because they feel that same way. So like you don't even get that emotional edge that you could potentially have. It's going to be, man. I got to say, you mentioned what we said a couple weeks ago about how this season's going to go. I'm not like, I mean, I think I was probably wrong about what the upside was at this point, but like I don't even know how to feel about what comes next because I really don't know because we'll learn a lot these next 2 Big Ten games, but it's hard to have, and I think fans might feel this way too. It's hard to have confidence in the team when you just watched what you just watched, right? Like they need to get that kind of sour taste out of their mouth. They need to get out of the fans' mouths and let them kind of move on so they're not just dealing with, we lost to Bucknell, where do we go from here? right? Like, and if they don't come out of these next two with a win, like if they drop to 4-6, I know they're not easy opponents with Maryland and Ohio State, but man, this is like they just need it to end, right? They need to do whatever they can to get one to get their confidence back.
And I think that's the motto going into the game against Maryland. Hey, man, we got a team that's, struggling just like us, and this is a must win. This is something that we got to get. Like, there's no, like, we got to do, if we got to use everything, if somebody has to pay the whole game, whatever it needs to be, we got to get this game. And that's what it's going to be. And we know just how losses can become a snowball effect and roll down the hill. Wins can do it as well. And we saw it with the teams before. Like in these last couple of years, especially since I've been gone, man, they get one win and then boom, it's becoming a streak of wins. They can 3 out of the next 3 out of 4. And then we sitting there, it's like, well, maybe can they beat Michigan State or they beat Michigan? Those are things that can happen that just in a positive way. So, and I will say too, like, I know like it's kind of a negative thing going on right now, how we feel about everything. But at the same time, like, man, we got to still take into consideration, man, new coach, new team, new, for these guys. And there are going to be some bumps in the road, and they're going to be bigger bumps. Like maybe Shrewsbury didn't go through this type of losses, but he did struggle, a little bit as well his first year, and so did Pat, so did, I'm sure Ed did before, so these guys coaches are coming through, new coaches, new team, trying to figure out how to trying to get their players to buy into the new system or whatever they might have. Like, so there is going to be some bumps in the road. Obviously, you don't want it to be a loss to Bucknell. You rather it be a loss to Ohio State and, a loss to A&M or whatever it may be. But you don't want that. You don't want it to be something that's going to just trickle and just take over your whole season. But there are some bumps in the road. So I know there are fans and there are people that may, man, all right, like you said, man, well, now I don't have to watch them. I know they won't make the tournament and this and this and that. But at the end of the day, like, we're not hitting home runs here. We're just trying to be the best team. Like I told you last year, you got to be the best team you could be at the end of the year. And if that's NCAA tournament, hey, that's the goal was achieved. If it's NIT, if it's, hey, we're 500, if, hey, we made some noise in the Big Ten, hey, we're playing our best basketball right now. We're out of everything, but we knock some guys off in the Big Ten tournament. Like whatever it may be, whatever that might be, but you want to be the best team that you can be at the end of the year, especially going into the next season where you can build off that and make some noise the next year. But this year isn't finished. Like my thing of this year isn't finished. We got time, and I don't know, it's possible. All you think, like you said, the things that we're saying is we're not pulling something out of our hat. We're not pulling a rabbit out of our hat. Hey, we need ace to be ace. We need a leader. We need guys to buy in. We need guys to come together and understand the value of every game and every possession. And we're not rocket science. Guys can come together and do that. And once they do that, and once it starts clicking, we know. Then we'll see what this team can be.
Yeah, and these next 3, like I said, it's not just the 2, by the way. They also go to MSG to play Georgia Tech next Saturday. Yeah, it's another big one. They do have 2 more. I was wrong when I said they don't have a team worse than Bucknell. They actually play Lemoyne, who is ranked 357th later this year. Mm-hmm. So, I guess if you want to point to it can get worse, it's that. But listen, they're gonna win those games against those 300+ teams in all likelihood. I know I said this about the Bucknell game too, but I feel confident they're going to win those 2 games, and they're going to try and build some momentum because there is, like we've said, that there's a chance to fall off more here with these 2 Big Ten games with an ACC matchup. Then, if they get one of these next 3, right, and I know that feels like a low bar, but if you just get one of the next 3. Get those 2 easy ones and get into January just feeling good about yourself. It can make a world of difference. And like you said, like the goal, maybe it's not to make the NCAA tournament anymore. Maybe if it gets worse, it's not to make the NIT. But maybe you get to 500 and you win, 3 or 4 to finish the season, and you feel good, right? And you feel good about what's happening next year. Because Micah Shrewsbury did not make the NCAA tournament in year 1. I'm not saying they're going to make it in year 2 with this program. Under Mike Rhodes, like I think it would be an unfair expectation at this point to put on fans to expect that.
Yes.
And listen, it's on Mike Rhodes to get them to the point where they can make it, because that at the end of the day, that's what the money's for, right? Like that's his job in all of this. But if they can get to a place where they feel good going into next year, and I'm with you, like I'm not burying this team this year, but it's just not good right now. It's tough to go in and say, oh, they'll be fine, right? Like, but there's a lot to fix. But if they can get to a spot where they can feel good about the end result, even if it's maybe not one they would have felt good about 2 weeks ago at the end of the season, then I think there's something to be said for that, right? Because they have to build something. There has to be kind of proof of concept here, because we've been talking about all this big picture stuff and everything, and what we think their goals can be and everything. But the on the court product right now is not good, right? Like it's not living up to what it was supposed to be. You mentioned, havoc and like what this defense is supposed to look like under Mike Rhodes. They're just not. They're letting guys blow by them on the ball. They're giving up way too many open threes. Like shots aren't falling. That's a big problem, but I think that generally rectifies itself, right? Like it's just kind of the math ends up working out how it works out in the end. You usually get to that kind of medium watermark as long as you have good enough shooters. But the defense to me is like really concerning, because we talked about in the preseason. We'll find out if the defense is going to work in the Big Ten. It hasn't worked against some teams that aren't even Big Ten teams. And it does have me at least concerned that, okay, what's this going to look like in January, February, and March? And I think right now it might be too early to tell, but the signs are not necessarily great.
Yeah. Like you said, when we've been saying it all this whole clip, man, it's like I said earlier too, man, it's disappointing, but I still got faith in them. I believe in them. And I know you do too, man. You want them to turn this thing around, because when Penn State basketball is doing well, it brings a lot to the school as well. Obviously we know the football program.
They're more fun to cover. You know what I mean? Like I get to cover the NCAA tournament last year.
Exactly. It's more fun to cover, especially when you got fans in the seats, and the BJC can be something that can really be a tough place to play at when it's full. And so we just you want the guys to just give it their all and play the best they can play. And obviously they're in a funk right now. The only way to you got to look up like this, man. And I've been there before. I'm telling you, where you lost a couple games, kid, and you're like, damn, all we got to do is get one. Let's just get one. You know what I mean? Literally, we get one, and after that, it's like, all right, let's get the next one now. It happens like that, and you never know where it can come and where it can the end can be for that. So I'm looking forward to this game against Maryland. I hope they, come out and come with some fire, because, man, they got to have some type of fire. I'm sure the last couple practices at the Bucknell had to have been, bloodbaths, or I don't even know if I can say that now, but and they had to have been.
Well, listen, this is the interesting thing though, that like Rhodes, at least my impression of him was that he was a fiery guy. Mm-hmm. I didn't get that feeling coming out of this, right? Like, and I think we've seen a lot of coaches have gone to this anyways nowadays, right? Where you're like, every kid's different, right? Not all players are going to respond to the same thing. And it's they're trying to be empathetic and like maximize the guys and reach them the best way they can. He wasn't as fiery as I maybe had anticipated. He was definitely disappointed, and he said it. He said it's not good enough over and over and over again. Like, he took full responsibility as the head coach should and does, and good on him for doing that, right? Like, he's not going to throw his players under the bus for he said they had to be better, but he said it came back to him at the end of the day, which I think is the right way to handle that situation. Yeah. But yeah, there was a level of disappointment, and he said a couple of times, I thought it was an interesting comment, like that he knows what he signed up for, and like with everything here, which I don't want to dive too deep into that because I don't want to put words in his mouth or anything. I just thought it was interesting that he said that. But yeah, I think like him taking accountability is good. The players also have to take accountability at the end of the day. But yeah, I just got a sense of, I don't know, just like frustration and sadness more than anything. And not to say he doesn't want to fix it. He does, and he wants to, but maybe less anger than I had anticipated.
Yeah. I mean, for me, even as a player, when you see, I think when you see that your leader, your coach is more disappointed, it's like your parent, like, right. It's when your parents are mad at you, like, they're mad at me. But when they're disappointed, that means so much more. So, man, I'm hoping and I'm assuming that those guys understood. He's like, man, you know what, man, like, we got to pick this up. Like, and for ourselves, for coach, for everybody that's behind the scene, for former players, for you guys, people covering us, like, we got to change this around because, man, we talked a big game. We said we're going to make noise. We're going to do this. And we're going to do what we need to do. And, like, we're not showing that right now. And again, it's still early. You know what I mean? We're not sinking the ship right now. Like, but it has to change, and it has to even if they don't win, you know what I mean, the next 3 games or whatever it might be, but there has to be a better showing than what it was shown in Bucknell and VCU and the rest of those games. It has to be a better showing. It has to be a competing. We want to see the team against A&M. And that's the team we want to see. We want to see the team against A&M and let the dice roll how they may. But at the end of the day, you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. The same thing that we've said before. Like we think that his style of play is going to win some games because it's going to wreak havoc. So go out there, and we need guys to go out there and wreak havoc. Leave it all out on the floor. You know what I mean? It's just now what you know what I mean. I don't know. Final have they? I'm assuming they almost are finished with finals, or they're going into finals.
I think finals week is either this week or next week. It's nice that I don't have to think about this ever again. Every finals week, I'm reminded that I don't ever have to think about finals week. It's not my sixth year of not giving a shit of when finals are. It's great. I love
you, man. I'm 10 years out. I'm like finals and tests, and I don't know none of that, man. But now I'm just hoping that the guys can get through past finals, and then they can really turn this thing around. Because hey, nobody's on campus. It's just us, man. Let's focus on this. And I'm not sure the whole Ace thing, but hopefully he can lock in too. And I understand, big campus, new things, new people. You know what I mean? Whatever it might be, So you just got to make sacrifices. And I think I told these guys too, as far as, and I've said this to other players as well, like younger players when I speak, and I just tell them it's like every action has a reaction. So whatever you decide to do, sometimes if it's eating bad, if it's going out, if it's not, watching film, that night, or putting up shots there tonight, all that stuff has a reaction. And right now, how bad do you really want it? Like, hey, you want to win this game for the teams, you want to do the things, and at the end of the day, individually, you want to play better. Because I know he's sitting there like, man, I'm not playing to the capability that I can play. I know I can. My assists are down. I'm not sure how his points are. Maybe might be around the same, but the points are bringing in wins. So at the end of the day, he has to do that, and it goes all the way down to Kanye, to Puff. I name these guys because they were at Big Ten Media Day. So those are the guys that we're expecting to be able to carry this team and do the right things. And so those guys have to just make the sacrifices, just like everybody else, on that team as well. Make that sacrifice and understand that, hey, Christmas break, hey, it's time to turn this season around and start going back up this hill and not down it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to leave it for this week, because that's kind of where they're at, right? It's make or break time. I know it's weird to say that in December, but 0-3 over the next 3 is going to be it's going to go to a bad place if that's the case. You're right. They need to get it. They need to get it going uphill again. But like I said, I think that's probably a good way to leave it this week. As always, you can find Tim on Twitter at TimFraze23. You can find me on Twitter at Jon Sauber. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.
See you.